Hey guys, welcome back to round 7 of the candidates tournament. Now in this video, I'm just going to be recapping one game, the game between Richard Rapport and Nepo. Now, the reason for that is the other 3 games are still playing, and I wanted to go ahead and do this one because it just finished and it was very, very interesting. And this was kind of one of the crucial games from this round. So if you remember from last time, Nepo is currently in the lead with 4.5 points. Fabiano Caruana is right behind him with 4, and then we have Hikaru, Nakamura, and Richard Rapport with 3 points are the next closest players, okay? So if Richard was able to win this game, he would go from 3 to 4 points. Nepo would stay at 4.5, and so that would actually help everybody else in the tournament get a little bit closer to catching Nepo, okay? So just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, up until this point, Richard has drawn every single game that he's played, which is funny because some of those games have been some of the most interesting and exciting positions, and yet he ended up with 6 draws so far. All right, so keep all of that in the back of your mind, and let's go ahead and take a look at this game. So we have another Petrov, which Nepo has been playing quite frequently with black against e4 this tournament. And we kind of follow the main line. Both players are just developing, getting castled, very symmetrical position. c4, now we get a little bit of imbalance in the position. And after c6, the move queen to b3 is kind of the first sort of obscure move. So the main lines would be just something normal like bringing the rook to the open file. Queen to c2 is a more normal square for the queen. Knight to c3, just developing a piece. Even just trading this pawn has been played quite a bit. Queen to b3 has not been played very often at all. Not very many games in the database at the master level. And white's idea is to line up on this b pawn so that if black decides to move this bishop, well, then the queen can come down and then black has problems with the rook, right? So what does Nepo do? Plays the move bishop to g4, allows the pawn to be captured. Now this is actually a line that you can play, and there's a specific point behind it, and it turns out that Nepo actually knew, or at least this is what it seemed like. It seemed like Nepo knew more theory than Richard did following this line. So let's just see what happens. We get the trade on the knight. Obviously, white's knight is now being attacked. So knight to g5. And now bishop to e7 is attacking the knight, giving up this pawn. So white takes it. And now black takes up the pawn on d4. Okay. And white plays queen takes b7. Now, what's going on here? Well, it's the position is kind of a mess. You've got the knight, which is hanging, which white is saying, go ahead, take my knight because I'm going to take your rook. There's also an attack on the bishop here, which is undefended. So lots of pieces are kind of hanging. And so one thing black could do would be to play a move like knight to d7, which defends the rook, blocks off the queen from hitting the bishop, but then white's going to take on c6, which now defends white's pieces. It's still kind of a tricky position, but after queen d5, this is actually just better for white. If you count the pawns, white just has more pawns than black does, right? And so that's kind of the reason why black doesn't usually go for that line. And here, Nepo plays queen takes e4. And after queen takes a8, we have the amazing move. Or if you'd like to pause the video, if you haven't seen the game already, and think, what do you think Nepo would have played here? I'll give you a chance to do that. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, bishop to h3, which looks absolutely absurd. It looks like, what are you doing? You're just giving your bishop up for free. And you might say, well, yes, there's a checkmate threat, but I mean, come on, it's a free piece, right? What's the point? Well, the point is, after it gets captured, which is what happened in the game, the point is you have, or you're trying to get a perpetual check. So you're going to go check, king's going to move, you're going to go check, and after back and forth, it's just a draw. It's kind of like a forced draw type of a line, which, if you think about it from Nepo's perspective, he's leading the tournament, he's ahead of everybody, he's playing with black. A draw is a great result, right? It's great. And so it makes a lot of sense why he would go into this line. Now, the question is, did Richard know this, or did he not realize that there was a forced draw? Now, if you look at the time usage, okay, he spends, what is that, 21 minutes playing king to g1, which tells me one of two things. Either one, he was surprised and didn't realize that there was this forced draw available, or he was trying to think, is there any way that I can play on and not, go for this draw by perpetual check, right? And so here we go. We repeat one more time. And now he decides to play f3. Okay, so he's trying to block off the queen so it can't keep putting him in check, which makes a lot of sense. But now, after queen to d3, white has another problem of, okay, I have to defend my rook or do something with my rook. If you try to, let's just say, move the rook, well, then this pawn is getting captured, right? And now black's actually going to win the game after king g1, bishop c5 check, and black is just winning. So you have to be careful, right? And if you try to move your king, you know, like let's just say king to g1, again, black's going to win the game now because the bishop and queen on this lone king here is very strong. So I think king to g2, and then we kind of have the same deal of like, okay, black's going to do the same thing again, right? Just back and forth, back and forth. So after a while, let me go back to the game here. So queen to d3 was played. After quite a bit of thinking, even to get to this position, you notice Richard's time is at 51 minutes. He plays the move knight to d2. Now, let me just talk about this move. Even though the engine is saying like, hey, that's not the greatest choice, you should have taken the draw. This is a very gutsy move, and I have a lot of respect for Rapport playing this move because, you know, when you think for as long as he thought over an hour already, that tells me that he did not study this, or at least if he did, his preparation ended here. He didn't look at what happens after, right? To play a move like that when, you know, you look at Nepo's time, he hasn't even used 10 minutes. That means he's still in theory. He you know, knows what's going on. To play a move like this takes a lot of guts, okay? It's easy for us sometimes to sit back when we're watching and say, oh yeah, you should play this or do that. But when you're in the moment, playing in the tournament, the pressure's on. You know that everybody's analyzing your game. You think about what's at stake. You're right at that midway point in the tournament, right? You're trying to make a comeback. You've played very, very well. He hasn't lost a game, right? All draws. To take a chance like this and to say, no, I'm not going to take the draw. I mean, that is a lot of kudos go out to Richard. I really like that, right? And I think it makes for more interesting chess when you don't just always take these easy draws, right? So, and that being said, he's got a tough task ahead of him. And the main reason for some people might say, well, hold on a second, isn't he just ahead a rook? Like, why wouldn't he want to play on? Here's the problem. After the move queen to d7, where is white's queen going to go to? You can't take the pawn. You can't take the knight. You can't take either. You can't move your queen. And next move, black's going to play knight to a6. And guess what? The queen is trapped. So that's the problem. And by playing knight to d2, obviously he would have saw that. He's accepting the fact that, hey, after the next move by black, I am going to have to sacrifice my queen for the rook and end up having two rooks for a queen. Now, and that's exactly what happened. We see the trade here. Now, a lot of the times, two rooks for a queen can be actually better. Like the two rooks can outperform the queen. But there's a couple of things that are very, very different about this position. And number one is that white's king is not safe. Okay, look at these pawns. This is not an ideal pawn structure. If this pawn was over here, completely different story. If this pawn was even here, completely different story. If they're nice and pretty, you can kind of tuck your king behind the pawns. Totally different than when the queen is going to have access to your king. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second of all, there's kind of some random pawns on both sides of the board. Queens are very good at attacking things on lots of different places on the board, right? Like if you imagine if maybe the board was kind of all closed up and there was only maybe, let's say, one open file where both rooks could just pile up on and the queen couldn't really get anywhere, that would be a different story. But in this case, that's not what's happening here. And so that's why this is such a gutsy decision by white to go for this. So we get bishop to f4. Queen takes h3. The rook comes over, and notice how this queen is already attacking things. Like white has to be careful. You can't really move your rook or you lose the pawn. You can't really move this rook up or you lose your rook and it's checkmate. So many things you have to watch out for. And so it's a very tough position to play. It almost looks like maybe white's going to have some chances to come down here with the rook and the bishop and create some counter threats once white figures out a way to, you know, deal with the rook. But Nepo plays this move h6, which is a great move because now if there's any ideas of back rank checkmates, those are all gone. King's going to run over here. Also, any ideas of bringing a knight or a bishop to g5 are gone now because the pawn's going to take. A really nice move, just kind of slowly improving his position. Bishop to g3, the point is he's trying to block off the queen from attacking on f3, so that's one less thing that he has to sort of worry about, right? Knight to c5, a great move. You know, you look at this knight over here on the side, not really doing much. There's a knight in the center of the board, just controlling so many different squares. And so it makes a lot of sense to trade those pieces off, right? That's going to help black. So rook comes over. and he doesn't trade right away. And I should point out the reason for that is if you take here right now, rook takes e4, and it actually, now white has the ability to very easily kind of double up rooks on either of these files, and you can't take the pawn because the bishop is blocking. It's still good for black, but I guess that's the reason why he decided to keep the knight on just for a little bit longer and maybe try to go to f4. So this is a tough position for white to play at this point just because of the king. You can't really go and start attacking stuff with your rooks because as soon as you start moving them away, your king becomes in danger, and you're going to see exactly how. h5, here comes the pawn. Once that bishop gets kicked away, it's like, and this threat happens again. And so you can see really tough position for Rapport to be in. He tries to defend here, queen to f5, h4, the bishop goes all the way back, had to leave, and then there's a moment here I want to show you. Yeah, right here, Stockfish says if Richard would have played rook e to e3, there's a chance he might be able to hold on to this game. So you're using both rooks to kind of defend that pawn. And it looks like maybe black can take here, but then you just take with the rook. Everything is defended. And, you know, white's going to try to hold on, maybe create some kind of a fortress. A lot of times when you're playing against the queen, if you can create a fortress where everything is kind of defending each other, kind of like this a little bit, the queen sometimes can't break through. So that would have been his best chance, but he plays this rook. Not easy to see, you know, what's happening. And after this trade, queen to f2 is a super strong move. That queen is just so annoying. You have to be careful. You can't, like, let's say, chase it away like this because you get checkmated. You can try this move, which I can't remember if that was, no, h3 was played first. So he's trying to kind of set up his pieces where everything is defended. The problem is the queen is just in such a great place, and now here comes the bishop. Bishop to e7. It looks like a kind of like a move like what's the point? Well, the point is he's just bringing the bishop around the only way that he can. So you can't move here because the pawn. You can't move here because the bishop, right? And so what do? Well, you go to e7 and you come over here, and that's how your bishop can kind of get into the game. So this guy comes back. By the way, if you try to take this pawn, bishop to g5 forces your rook to move, and once it moves, you're going to be losing your bishop over there like this, and so that's why you can't do that. So bishop to h2, bishop to g1. Richard's trying to create the fortress, like I mentioned, where he just kind of sits with all his pieces, doesn't move. But unfortunately, the bishop and queen are just too strong, and takes the pawn. Now the queen comes over, and once this pawn, queen, bishop, it's just too much. The fact that your king is exposed, you have no real counterplay at all on black's king. And I believe we had a resignation. Yep, right here. There's just nothing for white to do. So, you know, you look at this and you say, what was he thinking? Like, why didn't he take the draw? But like I said, we're halfway through the tournament. He's gotten only draws up to this point. Nobody's really able to beat Nepo, it seems, and Nepo is kind of getting away with it. And so he felt like, hey, this is a moment where I'm going to take a chance. It was a risk, and I think he probably knew that, right? Probably didn't think that he was just going to be completely winning. I'm sure that he saw this idea of losing his queen and having to give it up and just thought, hey, maybe I can make something happen with my two rooks. But Nepo played extremely well, you know, and so credit to him for playing well, for knowing all of this theory, right? He obviously studied a lot to get to this point. But yeah, takeaway for me, I'm just really impressed with Richard's guts to go down this line, even though he probably felt like it's risky and I might be walking into some preparation, which ultimately cost him, you know, the game. But hey, it's exciting to watch. I'm glad I got to see it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this recap and this game. But like I said, the other 3 games are still in progress, so we'll see what happens with the rest of this round. But I wanted to go ahead and get this game out there for you guys. And in our game behind us, I haven't checked the votes yet, but it seems like most of you guys are wanting to castle, but I need to double check, and then I'll make my move maybe in the next video or something. But anyway, I will see you guys in the next one. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.